Good afternoon to those of you joining from Australia, and good morning to those of you joining from the Gulf or the UAE. My name is John Kavanagh, and I am the Australian Trade Commissioner based in Dubai with the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, or Austrade. I'm also the Deputy Consul General based here in Dubai. Thanks for joining us today. We're here for a webinar that will take up the next 60 minutes to talk about opportunities for Australian fintech companies in the UAE and Middle East. I'm joined by three panelists who will be able to talk about some of those opportunities. I want to welcome the members who have joined us through FinTech Australia, Austrade and FinTech Australia. Very happy to be partnering on this event today. I want to give a particular thanks to Mr. Stuart Keane, who has been the driving force behind today's webinar. He's currently seconded into Austrade from FinTech Australia. So for those that aren't aware, FinTech Australia is a member-based organisation that is aimed at placing itself at the centre of the fintech ecosystem in Australia. Since 2016, it's built a really strong community of fintech companies, provides connections, supports innovation, has a say on regulation around fintech, and above all else, FinTech Australia is here to be the voice of the Australian fintech community. So welcome to those of you joining through FinTech Australia. Austrade, as many of you would know, is Australia's Trade and Investment Commission. We exist to connect Australian businesses to opportunities in the world and the world to Australian businesses. Our aim is to make it easier for Australian companies to go global by providing advice on trade and investment protocols and regulation, and reduce your commercial risk when it comes to considering market entry. So today we're here to discuss opportunities for fintech, for Australian fintechs in the UAE and the Middle East. The aim is to give you a very concise brief on the major developments in fintech in the UAE. I've got three panelists who are going to be able to describe what's happening in great detail. I look forward to introducing them shortly. And at the end of this hour, if you hear things that interest you or you would like to know more, I'd encourage you to connect firstly with Stuart Keane. And his email will be put up in the chat. And we'd like to be talking to you about opportunities for entry into the Middle East, particularly into the UAE. So first of all, to my right and on my screen, you can see Dr. Marwan Al-Zarouni. He is an internationally recognized blockchain technology advocate. He's the CEO of the Dubai Blockchain Centre, which was inaugurated in May 2018 and aims to create an ecosystem for blockchain companies and projects to thrive in. It provides educational classes, seminars around blockchain use cases in government and in the private sector. He's also the head of the Digital Asset Task Force, and that task force is conducting a comprehensive study to provide clear guidance on how digital assets can be encouraged and regulated in the UAE. He wears several other hats. He is the centre of most things technology related in Dubai. It's a great pleasure and privilege to have him on the panel today. So welcome, Dr. Marwan Al-Zarouni. And I will claim him as one of our own because his PhD is from an Australian university. So welcome this morning.
Thank you. And also my master's.
At master's and PhD. So that's wonderful. I'm also joined by Ms. Anusha Iqbal. So Anusha is here because she is working currently representing Zip Co, an Australian fintech in the Middle East. She is the co-founder and CEO of Spotty, which was taken over by Zip late last year. Prior to founding Spotty, she's been in the UAE and in Dubai since 2007, working with an investment group where she was leading the investment office function for them, responsible for evaluating investment opportunities in various sectors. Prior to that, her background is in investment banking and in asset management, working in New York. She's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, and we're looking forward to hearing from Anusha today about her experience and lessons learned for Australian companies looking to do market entry. So welcome, Anusha. Great to have you here as well. And my final panelist is Ms. Kokila Alaga, and she is the founder of Calm Legal Consultants. She has 15 years experience as a corporate, commercial and technology lawyer in the UAE. So she has significant experience in investments in corporations, joint ventures, project finance and private equity transactions. At Calm, she's provided, and it's currently providing legal advice to clients on highly specialized technology, including medtech and insurtech focused entities. And she today will be giving us an overview of the regulatory environment here in the UAE, tips and tricks for players looking to enter the market. So very quickly, before I pass to Dr. Marwan for the first panel session, it's not immediately obvious to people outside of Australia that we're actually a high skill and high talent workforce. And we're one of the most innovative countries in the world. We've got 167 billion Australian dollar technology sector that's grown 26% since the onset of the pandemic. If it was a single sector, technology would now be the third largest contributor to Australia's gross domestic product. We are not just food and minerals. Approximately 98% of Australian tech firms are small and medium-sized enterprises. So, for example, Euromonitor ranks Australians 4th in the world for digital consumption. Australia is now ranked 2nd in Asia for FinTech development and 6th globally. But we are underweight in the Middle East. And that's part of the reason why we're running this webinar today, is we want to alert people online to the opportunities that exist in the Middle East. And we would like to see more Australian high-quality FinTech companies looking to enter this market. I'm now going to pass to Dr. Marwan. Dr. Marwan is going to talk about, in his presentation, the opportunities in the UAE. The title of his presentation is Building the Digital Capital of the World. Dr. Marwan, thank you.
Thank you, John. I think this relationship with Dubai and Australia and the UAE in general and Australia has been a long, really relationship with us working together, even as Dubai Blockchain Center, as well as Digital Dubai, on a number of initiatives during and before Expo, and even after Expo, as we're speaking right now here for one of the entities of Digital Dubai. I think Dubai has situated itself very nicely within the digital realm, actually, as a market leader in this space. And we can't do this without our partners, and Australia being one of the biggest supporters of that. We are actually ranked as #1 globally when it comes to smart cities, and 16th when it comes to the ease of doing this. One of the things that we pride ourselves with is providing business licenses in under 15 minutes. 70% of Fortune 500 companies choose Dubai as their regional and sometimes even global headquarters, especially after COVID. Dubai is home of the Middle East's first unicorn, and it has established a number of unicorns as we speak right now. Some of them actually most recently are within the cryptocurrency space, and a lot of them actually within the fintech space. It is considered one of the safest cities to live in. The UAE is one of the safest countries actually to live in. And Abu Dhabi, which is our capital city, was #1 actually globally when it comes to the safest city in the world. It attracted 16.7 million visitors in 2019, and in Expo it was 20 million plus, I think 24 million to be exact. And that's over the period of 6 months, not even a year. It hosts also one of the world's biggest airports, and it actually won the title of the busiest airport, surpassing Heathrow as well. So it is also the hub for a lot of the fintech and ICT companies in the world. And it's a no-brainer because we have gone through a huge journey actually to get to this point. So Dubai started the first government entity related to digitizing the city and digitizing government services in 2000. And by 2022, we have actually gone through multiple restructuring, multiple evolutions within this entity, which was called Smart Dubai, but now is known as Digital Dubai. The main change that happened in 2021 was actually shifting from the internal focus on improving government services to actually being improving digital services in Dubai in general. And this is where we are right now. Our focus right now is in improving how do you do business in Dubai, how do you actually live in Dubai, how to provide not only government services but private services in a very easy user-based environment. For example, renting a car journey, buying something from the store, buying something online, doing a government service, doing something like logistics, moving within Dubai. So this is basically the idea right now for us, and that's why the attracting companies who are game changers within the digital space and the fintech space is key to us. We believe that digital is the new frontier for financial services, and Dubai can play a leading role in that, of course, with the help and the partnership with the leading countries in the space. Therefore, Dubai, in the last year, once it shifted to this focus, it had to consolidate the efforts. So I come actually from Dubai Electronic Security Center, which now became a part of Digital Dubai. So cybersecurity is always the focus for us in Dubai. It was actually one of the strategies that was launched back in 2014 to basically provide resilient government and private sector services, and not only from the cybersecurity side, but also availability and the quality of service, even under stressful situations. And we were one of the first countries to not have a full lockdown enforced. We have a partial lockdown and only for a very short period of time, and we came out of it even stronger. And even the airline businesses in Dubai did not come to a complete stop. We still had, at the worst times, even cargo being utilized fully within the COVID situation. Of course, to do very well in this space, you have to have accurate statistics, and both Dubai Statistics Center and Dubai Data contributed to that. And Dubai's approach to COVID was all focused on data-driven, steps and operations-based, response to COVID, where the reliance was always on the continuous data feedback. And of course, the core of all these government services was a department called Smart Government Services, and now all of these for different entities became part of Digital Dubai. So the new Digital Dubai mandate encompasses many things. Of course, from our previous undertaking was the government, digitizing government services. What was added to it, of course, is now digital economy with a focus on fintech and digital assets, digital society, digital city infrastructure when it comes to things like IoT, quality of life in Dubai, also focus, like I said, on continuous data and statistics feedback, and basing our investments on in a dynamic way, rather than having, for example, 5 or 6 year strategies. We have very short term, 1, 2, 3 year strategies, where we actually continuously look at data in the space of a couple of weeks rather than a month or longer. And of course, improving the talent pool here in Dubai, which was one of the biggest challenges during COVID. Now we have a lot of initiatives within Dubai and the UAE around coding, around attracting creators to come to Dubai, and also entrepreneurs to make their lives easier and provide incentives programs to attract them to not only come to Dubai, but also stay and thrive in Dubai. So, Dubai plays, Digital Dubai plays four key roles. I'm not going to go into very depth into these roles. As an enabler, also as an operator, as a regulator as well, and a leader within the space. One of the initiatives that has driven this transformation was actually Dubai paperless strategy to enable things like blockchain technology or eKYC or any kind of fintech service. You really need to first get rid of papers. You really need to get rid of the processes that depend on paper. And to do that, actually, it's not as easy as people think. It's very easy to get rid of paper within a certain organization, but when you have the interaction between the organization and other organizations or government departments, even multinationally, if you deal with other countries, paper is extremely hard to get rid of. So we made it a mandate in Dubai to get rid of all paper, 100% of paper usage within the country and the city. And we have succeeded in that. And right now, 99% of all the processes within Dubai and the UAE are paperless. One of the things that replaced papers in Dubai is what we call unified apps. So one app on the level of Dubai called Dubai Now that consolidates all government services within one portal, within one application, where you can have a pay for all button, where you can inquire about things like toll roads, traffic, your phone bill, your gas bill, your utilities, your kids' education fees, everything in one place. And it's a world leader app that's accompanied also by a universal wallet that you can pay for all your bills instantly. And you can even automate those as well. One of the initiatives that was launched just post-COVID last year is also invest in Dubai. So the idea here is that you can get a driver, not driver license, but company trade license within minutes, all done digitally. You don't have to fly here to do it. We have, I'll speak about that in the next slides, but we have something called UAE Pass, which is our digital identity. And this is basically fully digitized without even having to meet a single person. And this is the actual enabler for this. It's an app that anyone in the world can actually apply for. All you need is the Emirates ID, but actually in the next phases, it will be completely digital. You don't even need Emirates ID. And that's going to be done by something called digital onboarding. So we will onboard everyone self-onboarding through the application using biometrics. So that's the end of my presentation. And the aim right now for Dubai is to double the number of our digital economy, which is right now at 100 billion dirhams today, in 2 years. So that's a huge undertaking, but I think we can do it, and I think we are on track to do that, even as we speak right now. So thank you all, and if you have any questions, please let us know afterwards.
Thank you, Dr. El-Zerrouni. That's really interesting. I've got a few questions, but I'll circle back. And just a reminder to the people that are joining us on the webinar, if you can put those questions in the chat and we'll moderate those. We'll hear from our panelists first, and then we'll come back for the questions. But just a quick reflection, having lived in Dubai now for almost 3 years, the pace of change and the pace of digitization of government services has been breakneck. And the ambition for what Dubai will look like 10, 15, 20 years from now is breathtaking, and it is worth being across. We're going to now pass to Anusha, and Anusha is going to talk to us a little bit about setting up a fintech in the UAE, her experience there. Anusha, I know you've got a presentation. We'll get this microphone working for you. And I think we were talking to Anusha earlier. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a to and fro, which is wonderful. So Anusha, I'll pass over to you. And if you can talk us through the Spotty Zip experience, that would be much appreciated. Thanks.
Sorry, Anusha and John, sorry to interrupt. We just can't hear you at the moment. I can see that you're speaking, but we can't hear you from the audience side. So maybe that's better now.
They just turned the mic on, it was off. Sorry, the mic was off previously. Can you hear me now?
Perfect, go ahead. Thanks, Anusha.
Great. Actually, what I was saying was that as Dr. Marwan was speaking, a lot of the things that he referenced in his presentation resonated with me. Everything from having to set up my business in early of 2020, how we were able to grow that business during a period of pandemic when even the concept of a startup would have been, would have caused panic for most people, but we were in a jurisdiction that really helped enable businesses to continue to grow during those difficult periods, to the pace of change that has occurred in the UAE over those years. I've been in the region since 2007, so over 15 years. And last week, I was telling Dr. Marwan, I had to notarize a document, and I did not have to meet anybody in person. I did not have a single piece of paper that was physical. Everything is done electronically, including appearing in front of a notary public and signing that document all through my UAE pass. And it was so efficient. So I think just in terms of the infrastructure that has been set up to enable businesses to grow has been phenomenal. Just taking a step back, when, as I mentioned, my previous experience has been in private equity. I spent a lot of time assessing businesses, doing investments, not just in the UAE, but around the region. Even back then, a lot of the leaders were emerging from the UAE simply because of the infrastructure that had been put in place to enable these companies to grow. When I founded my business in 2020, we started operating. We did our first transaction in April of 2020, and everything went into lockdown a few weeks later. I would be remiss to say we were in a state of panic, wondering how is it that we were going to launch a new business and grow. But the rate and the state and the pace at which the state evolved to enable and to continue to allow businesses to flourish was remarkable. And the fact that they had the infrastructure to allow things like digital payments to acceptance online really helped our business grow. And in fact, over the course of the pandemic, we've seen massive growth in our business. We were then fortunate enough at the end of 2021, so about 18 months into our journey, to be acquired by Zipco, which is a publicly listed Australian business. And they used the Spotty platform to enter the UAE market and are now using this as a base to expand into the broader region. I think that's the other thing that's extremely remarkable about the UAE, is that it really is a gateway or hub to a much larger world out there. And the ability to set up a headquarter or home base, I think Dr. Marwan referenced some numbers in his presentation, is not just unique to how Zip is approaching the market, but how many international businesses access the broader region. So that's sort of my journey in a quick nutshell, but happy to take some more questions and keep this interactive, John.
Yeah, thanks, Anusha. I've got a question for you, and I reckon our members or our participants on the call might be interested. What's the hardest part about setting up a fintech in the UAE? We've heard a lot about what's really good and what was easy, and that's wonderful. But if we're going to sort of speak frankly,
Yeah.
What was tough?
I'll tell you, one of the hardest parts has been finding and retaining talent.
Right.
So I'm probably not alone. It's not probably unique just to fintechs. I think all startups struggle with this. First of all, you have to find the right person that fits that role. And then you have to figure out how to retain them. Over the years, UAE has become, in terms of attracting people to come and set up a base here, has also evolved. So when I first moved here, this was 2007, and you would have a conversation with someone and say, oh, I've been here 3-4 years, and oh, you've been here 4 years. It's like it would seem like a lifetime. Now I meet people, you've been here 15-20 years. That's very common, and that's a demonstration of how people are now basically making this home and finding a way to grow. And I think that's extremely important to set up an ecosystem that will allow businesses to grow, because you can't grow without people. You can't grow without the right talent pool. And I think the UAE has done a good job of giving people the freedom to come here and experiment and grow. But I still think that that's still a big improvement. That's still an area that needs a lot of work in terms of how do you get people comfortable in coming here and saying, this is my home, this is where I will innovate, this is where I will found my business, this is where I'll allow it to grow. And then even attracting talent from outside, having, whether it's colleagues from Australia who want to come and set up a home base here for a number of years. I think that's one thing that can definitely be improved on.
Yeah, right. Now, of course, Zip is a buy now, pay later provider. And I was just wondering, for the benefit of the participants on the call, can you tell us what's the appetite for buy now, pay later, and more generally, sort of FinTech innovation in the UAE and regionally as well?
Sure. So buy now, pay later specifically, Australia, and it's a concept that's been in Australia for much longer than it has been here. Australia, in fact, is probably one of the most mature market for buy now, pay later businesses. When we first launched here, we actually got a lot of pushback. The main pushback was, digital retail is less than 4% of my business. Why should I bother with buy now, pay later? Everybody shops in store. People are not comfortable shopping online. Cash on delivery is such a large portion of my sales. How are you going to, how does your business model change it? So we actually had a lot of pushback. As I said, we launched the business in early 2020, but discovery had started through 2019. And we were speaking to retailers, we were trying to convince them to come onto the platform. And most of them were like, it's too early for this kind of business model. But we were not deterred, and we said, we're still going to go ahead. And if we need to build the business slowly, we'll build the business. We'll convince people to use the service and demonstrate the value that it offers the retailers and the consumer. And then, in fact, what happened post-April 2020 gave massive tailwinds to BNPL, not just globally, specifically regionally, because all of a sudden you had people who had never shopped online shopping online. You had people getting a lot more comfortable with the ease of digital payment. If you think about it, I think this was a report that came out around the summer of 2020, it said something like 70% of shoppers online were doing their first purchases online, right? And so you had this massive shift. You had all of the major retail houses focusing on their digital strategy. Businesses that had not even had online stores were forced to put online stores overnight. And so that really helped move the product along. Today, there's not a single major retailer who's not heard of buy now, pay later in the region. Today, everybody, and we are now in a position where we get inbound calls to say, how can you help support my growth? What can I do to get you on my platform and offer your services to customers? So buy now, pay later is definitely grown quite significantly in the region. Overall, generally, I think FinTech, and again, this is the reason why UAE makes so much sense, and all of my interaction with the regulators particularly have been extremely positive. And that gives you a sense that the enablers of this environment have a mandate to allow businesses, particularly FinTechs, to flourish. And when you have those kinds of conversations, as a founder of a business, it gives you it relieves a lot of pressure, right? Because you already have a pressure of operating and growing a business. And then when you're in a jurisdiction that's saying, please do what you want, grow the business and keep us engaged, keep us involved. There will be regulation at some point, but their mindset is more focused on growth and promoting the innovation than over-regulating. And I think that gives us as business founders a lot of comfort in coming out and saying, let's do this. And you need that encouragement as founders and entrepreneurs.
I wonder, Anusha, then, and I want to hear from Kokila shortly as well, but Anusha, so, I mean, it strikes me, I think one of the big differences between working in the UAE and Australia, which is obviously where I'm from, is it feels a little bit turned around. Here, the government is on the leading edge of innovation. It's the government that is pushing businesses to digitize, to innovate, to go paperless, to embrace FinTech, to embrace technology. That's unusual, I think, in the world. It's definitely not the case in Australia, where I think the private sector would lead and government would trail behind with regulation and rules. So that strikes me as a very big difference in the UAE. But Anusha, just in terms of getting down, I guess, to the nitty gritty a little bit, what would be like the 1, 2, or even if I can put you on the spot, 3 things that you wish you had known? So let's say you're an Australian company, you're doing quite well in Australia, you're confident in your technology, your people are good, you hadn't thought of the Middle East previously, but maybe this is something that is prompting you to think about it. What are a couple of things that a C-suite executive should be thinking about before they would come here, or as part of coming here?
I think first and foremost, relationships matter. And I think they matter a lot more in this region, mostly because things are evolving at such a fast pace. You really need to be connected within the ecosystem in order to succeed. And I don't think you can do that remotely. So I think if a business that's international truly wants to be successful, needs to have boots on the ground. And I think the old model of flying people in for a couple of meetings, line them, I think that we've sort of evolved past that. So I think if you really want to be successful in this part of the world, you need to have real substance of people here who are driving that, who are building those deeper relationships, and who are getting to know whoever your stakeholders are, whoever that broader stakeholder community is. So I think that would be extremely important. The second one is, despite everything, despite the push the state has had in digitization, one of the most painful sectors to deal with is still the banking sector. Yep. Sorry, Dr. Brahman, but I have to say that. And I think they are also evolving, but maybe that's why the FinTech opportunity is so great, right? And I think that's to just, dealing with the banking sector, keep planned properly. It will take time. That could be the one area that I think is not moving at the pace the state would really like it to move at. And the third is, I think, you be bold. What I found here is that there's a big acceptance of people who want to push the boundaries, and so don't be shy of asking for something that is different, and don't be shy of pushing forward what it might be. Well, I get that. Just ask. Chances are that it'll happen, and that's the beauty of this place.
You're right, Anusha, and I'll just reiterate all those points. And relationships matter. Obviously, Australia's had a pretty tough time during the pandemic when it comes to international travel. But for those people on the call, if you do have the opportunity to come to Dubai and see this for yourself, I encourage you strongly to do that. Spend some time in the region. Talk to Austrade, talk to FinTech Australia as well. The second thing too, the banks are tough. Yes, I suspect the banks are tough everywhere in the world. I'm not sure, but they are particularly tough here. I acknowledge that. And the third thing is, I can't tell you how ambitious Dubai feels. I can't tell you how optimistic this place feels at the moment. And it is rewarding boldness. And it is rewarding people that are prepared to go out there and make a stake and go for something. And that is one of the beauties of this city, I think, and of this country. So I'm now going to ask our third panelist to take over the mic. So Kokila, just a quick recap. Kokila is the founder and a partner at a law firm here in the UAE called Calm. And what they do is advise early technology companies on market entry and everything that they need to consider. So there's a presentation that Kokila is going to talk us through. And then again, I hope you're all storing up your questions and putting those in the chat. Kokila, hi.
Hello, everyone. To talk at the end about laws and regulations after such a fruitful discussion makes sense, because it's mostly businesses think about the legal system right at the end. But I'm actually quite glad to be here, and especially talking to Australia FinTech, because I did my master's in Monash, and all I know about FinTech, and I specialized in cryptography and digital signatures law way back in 2003. So it's good to be back and to talk and tell and promote this and say how UAE has, though, as you mentioned right in the beginning, that Australia has a huge knowledge bank. We have a talent pool. somehow it's not here in the Middle East. And that's what I have seen. I've been here more than 18 years now. So I've seen other regions, especially from Europe, from US, or from the Indian subcontinent, and how they've grown here. But Australia needs to be more vigilant, more presentable here. Now, just to begin with, I do have a presentation talking about fintech in general, but let me start with what happens if you want to come to UAE. Where do you start from? So you could start from reaching out to your consulate, to entities like Austrade, or there are business organizations, and you reach out to them and you put this whole idea of coming here. Interestingly, in UAE, why we are different, as we say, from the rest of the world is not just because we are very focused and very driven mission from the government, from the rulers, and they've been very, what I say, agile in the approach, and they've been able to pick the market sense and saying, this is what we need. This is the framework we need to work for. We're not a very old country. We're a fresh country, and we're ready to change and adapt to the new situations. I mean, my span of 18 years here, when I came here, initially it was mandatory that if you want to set up a business in Dubai, we had free zones, which were mainly for expats could come and own business 100% in those free zones. And then you had mainland UAE. So if you wanted to do business in the mainland and offer your services to the consumers here, you needed to set up a company in mainland, in which it was mandatory for you to have a UAE national as a majority stakeholder in your company. Now, that was what I say history. In the last few years, and especially from 2019 to 2022, we've seen too many regulatory and legislation changes. In fact, 2020 and 2021, we've seen more than 15 new laws and regulations being amended, which I can assure you globally, if you check around, you wouldn't find any country working at such a fast pace. And the reason is not that our laws were not good enough, the reason is that we want to adapt to the new systems. We did not have provisions for, say, technology companies. We did not have provisions in our banking systems for fintech companies to grow. But there's not been a hesitation. As rightfully both my panelists mentioned, it's a force from the government as well as the market drive. If we want to be the fintech hub of the Middle East, then all spheres in the society, in the ecosystem have worked for it, and especially the legislations and regulations around it. And interestingly, for a country our size, we have 3 major financial regulators working at par with each other, not subordinate, but working at par. So for all the expats who initially wanted to work in a common law system, the Dubai government took the initiative way back in 2003, 2004, and set up what is called the Dubai International Financial Center. So you had all investment and finance companies who were not very comfortable with the civil law system as what UAE had, got a chance to set up in the IFC, and the IFC currently is among the top 10 business hubs globally as we speak. So in a span of, say, from 2004 to 2020, less than 2 decades, this is where they've reached. Then we also had Abu Dhabi taking that lead way back in 2011 or 12. They set up Abu Dhabi Global Market on similar grounds. They had their own laws and principles based on common law principles, what Australia and other countries like UK are familiar with, and provided an entire ecosystem for innovative and finance companies to grow. And then in 2018, 2019, when FinTech started to grow, we had all these 2 regulators coming out with many new regulations around this space. And then interestingly, 2020, when the pandemic and the COVID happened, is when we saw a true digital transformation that happened, and things like buy now, pay later, or online payments using digital signatures, digital contracts became a survival mode, not a wishful thinking. We had even our Central Bank of UAE coming out with 4 very robust regulations covering every aspect of fintech that at that point of time they could think. And interestingly, they gave a full transition period to all the fintech players who were here, from payment service providers to different retail service providers, store value facilities, wallet systems, a transition period of 1 year to get licensed from Central Bank of UAE. And in that 1 year transition, we are working with many of them right now. It's very interesting that it's not, this is what you have to do. It's more of a dialogue with the regulator. So you could get on calls with the central bank team, explain your business model, listen to their point of view. They make exemptions for you. So it's like a full ecosystem drive, which is driven from the regulators, from the legislations that have made changes, as well as the market and the government support. We also have a lot of fintech incentives being given by both, I would say, the free zones as well as the mainland UAE. So if you have your program which you think is innovative enough and you would want the governments to support, you have incubators, you have accelerators, we have FinTech High, we have Hub 71 in Abu Dhabi, we have in the mainland a lot of incubation programs which have been launched by the Dubai Chamber of Commerce. So you would see what I say, it's a true fintech buzz in the country. And in that, it's most interesting to see how a regulator does not stop here and say, hey, a buy now, pay later is not regulated, so you're not allowed to work. That's not what the approach UAE is taking. It's taken the approach, you know your business, you're following the basic principles of law, you're not breaking any law. We may not have regulations for it now, but we will allow you to work in our system, work in the country, offer your service, and together we work in drafting a framework for it. That, I think, is something so unique that UAE has done, not only in the fintech, in the payment system, but also, I know we're not talking about cryptos and blockchain, but if we were, it's commendable how UAE has taken that leap of faith and said, we will go ahead and allow these businesses to grow, provided you follow the basic principles, the industry best practices, and we do not stop you from growing. So because of that, innovation's grown really fast over here. We have many RegTech solutions also on which governments participating, they're commenting. So many new laws in this space are coming, and those consultations are very transparent. They're released out to the public. Public can vote on it, give their comments on it, their discussions for it. So in a nutshell, I say the main reason why fintech's been able to grow, government had the vision, and then we had the full support from the whole ecosystem working in it.
Thanks, Kokila. That's great. I've got an obvious question. I think it's obvious. So on one hand, the rate of new legislation and regulation is very heartening. Like, it's changing, it's having to adapt to circumstances. But it also must be making it hard to get certainty about what's going to change, what isn't going to change. How are you finding the clients that you're advising navigating that regulation? And you mentioned the local partnership changes that have come in, because that is very intimidating to Australian companies, often when they are looking to come to the region and do business inside the UAE, so not based in a free zone. The requirement for a local partner has traditionally been a little bit of a barrier, or something that they've had to really look into and do a lot of due diligence on. Can you talk about that just a little bit more?
Sure. So with the recent amendments to our commercial companies law, you do not need a UAE national to be your business partner anymore. So it's not only that they do not have majority, you do not need that. Before that, the government in 2020 and 2021 came out with the grey list and the approved list for the foreign direct investment, in which they reasoned out that these are the activities in which an expat or a company from outside can come and invest in UAE directly without involving UAE nationals. And then there are certain sectors which still have been kept, and for all reasons, oil and gas would be one of those. Anything to do with nuclear or any of these industries would be still majority with the government, but rest all have been open for the public at large. Now, this is not just an announcement or change, but we are now actually seeing that the new companies that we're forming here in UAE do not need UAE nationals to be partner in that business. Now, going back to the question of how do you guide a client if they would think that this is uncertain, I wouldn't say that these regulations have come with an overnight change. These regulations have come with a lot of industry feedback and as a more of a requirement that the industry needs at this moment. So they've not been going anywhere, going backwards, but it's very progressive regulations that have come out. And any time where they have felt that after 6 months of a regulation being in place, that it may not be what the industry required, there are provisions. You could go and ask for an exemption. You could go and get into a dialogue, and we see these new amendments listening to these. So your feedback as a company, as an industry player, is extremely important over here. So when we had payment service provider clients, there were around 7 of those offering services for like good 6-7 years. We did not have regulations for those, but when in 2020 they were announced, they were given a full transition period, that how much time they have. They almost had more than a year to apply for these new licenses.
That's a great answer. I know Dr. Marwan also wears a bit of a regulatory hat in terms of providing advice on regulation. So the UAE has a population of around 10 million people, so a consumer base of around 10 million. And I think when Australian companies look at the region, they'll very quickly figure out that the big consumer market is Saudi Arabia. So 35 million people or just above that. How in sync are the reforms and the regulations that are happening in the UAE with Saudi? Is a company that would be compliant in the UAE, how much work do they have to do to then perhaps look at launching from the UAE, which has a well-deserved reputation for being the most innovative economic reformer in the region, to access what is arguably the biggest market in the region? That's a question for both of Dr. Marwan and Kokila.
So interestingly, what happens is that Dubai or UAE has been seen as a regional headquarter for most of the companies that would want to set up shop here, mainly because of what you saw in Dr. Marwan's presentation, the ease of setting up business and the whole global environment of having more than 190 nationalities working together, being a melting pot, making it easier for everybody to be here. UAE is undoubtedly the most preferred choice. But yes, the market size that we're looking at is Saudi Arabia. Market size is looking at, so we do not stop just at GCC. You need to look at Egypt. You need to look at other 22 Arab countries, which could be catered from your headquarters in Dubai. Now, SAMA, or the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia, as the Central Bank of UAE, has undergone many reforms and changes, so has SAMA simultaneously. And again, not just Saudi Arabia, we see that with Central Bank of Oman. We see that with Central Bank of Bahrain taking the lead and coming out with regulations, especially in the fintech sector. They have been, I would say, one step ahead of UAE coming out with new regulations. And they have been able to attract a lot of talent pool and a lot of companies to move there. So we see this as across the region that a lot of innovative steps have been taken. And once you set up shop in one of these countries, or say start with just the 6 GCC countries that we are in, it's easier for you to set up your office. There is no, please be clear, there is no passporting that, okay, I've got regulated by Central Bank of UAE, now I don't need to apply for a license in Central Bank of Saudi. Now, it doesn't work like that. You will still have to do it. But I would say a lot of that process is already done. So you've taken that first step, you have understood how the region dynamic works, you've got familiar to working with these government departments. It makes it easier for you to file for applications there.
Thanks very much. Okay, that's a great answer. And I'll go to comments for Dr. Marwan, but I'm also conscious that time is getting away from us a little bit, and I want to hear questions from the people that are participating from Australia. So Stuart Keane is actually going to moderate those questions. Stuart, I'll get you to jump in after Dr. Marwan's made his comment, and then we can hear questions from members. Thanks very much. So Dr. Marwan, what are your views on Saudi?
Because I haven't been there for a while, but I actually went there on a couple of times, actually visiting both Riyadh and Jeddah, and also doing Umrah in Mecca. And I think, look, the Saudi has changed dramatically post-COVID, and it is much more welcoming to business. In fact, 2 of my businesses already opened regional offices in Saudi, namely in Riyadh. Like you mentioned, it's one of the biggest markets right now. It is not as easy as people imagine, but it is up and coming, I would say. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, you will see huge growth in Saudi Arabia and huge shift in how doing business in Saudi is created. Given that the infrastructure is there right now, the service area that has nothing to do with fintech, but things like, for example, hospitality, hotels, infrastructure when it comes to road, logistics of moving around in cities, those are still up and coming in Saudi. They're not as convenient as they are here in the UAE. But I think it's going to take maybe 2 to 3 years to get to that level. But that being said, I think the government is like the UAE, is very open-minded right now. They are very forward, looking when it comes to adoption of technology, getting expats in to start their businesses and startups. Also, they have a lot of initiatives around the NEOM initiative in Saudi. It is up and coming, but you have to keep in mind that there's a cultural also shock that you might get in Saudi. You might not get that much of a cultural shock here in Dubai. That's something that you have to keep in mind when you go there. Also, there are a lot of opportunities. It's playing it by numbers. Basically, you have much bigger population, much higher, reward for you to be there, given just the pure numbers. And I think it's worth doing business in Saudi, but I think basing a headquarters in Saudi would be much more challenging. It's much more of an undertaking than doing a headquarters, for example, in Dubai or the UAE in general. So my advice for any Australian company is come establish yourself here in Dubai first, get a company, get a track record here in Dubai. Then once you get familiar with the region, you do a couple of trips to Saudi, get a partner maybe there in Saudi, and then expand your business there. Because once you're established in Dubai, getting a business in Saudi, like Kokila mentioned, is trivial, the things that are outside of that scope, which is just opening a business, is the hard part, which is the culture, the penetration in the market. It's not going to be as easy as you think in other regions in the world.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Marwan. I think Austrade reiterates that advice. The Australian companies would be consider the UAE first and then look at Saudi for scale. Stuart, over to you. I apologise, I haven't left you much time, and we do have a hard stop at the top of the hour. So over to you.
That's great. Firstly, from FinTech Australia, thank you so much, everyone, for all of your awesome insights. It's been great listening to all of you. And I love the links with Australia from each and every one of you. Kokila, I'm also a graduate of Monash University, and Dr. Marwan, that you studied in Australia, is fantastic as well. Obviously, Anusha and John, we know your links. We do have one question from the audience, so this will probably be perfect timing. The question reads, hi, thanks so much for these insights. In Australia, we have several cities that are attracting international fintechs with different incentives and opportunities. What are the key differences between Dubai and Abu Dhabi as a launch destination for fintechs? So I guess we've looked at the rest of the Gulf region, the dozens of countries, including the comments on Saudi, bringing that back to the UAE. How can we compare Dubai and Abu Dhabi for Australian fintechs? Maybe we'll start with Dr. Marwan on Dubai, and then we might jump over to Kokila on Abu Dhabi, if that's okay. Thanks very much.
Look, I think, there's no competition here. I think there are, you're spoiled for choice, I would say, when it comes to choosing a jurisdiction to base your business out of. It all comes down to how fast you want to grow, who are your stakeholders, who you want to align with, what kind of laws are you more familiar with, how fast you want to launch the business. There's a lot of other things that will dictate where you base your business out of. And like I said, it's rather than competition, is basically choice. There's so many choices, and you're literally spoiled for choice in the UAE.
I completely agree. As Dr. Marwan said, you're completely simply spoiled for choice here. So we have a lot of incentive given by both Abu Dhabi government or ADGM, which is the financial free zone based out of Abu Dhabi. And similarly, we have a lot of incentives again from either Dubai government directly or from DIFC, the Dubai International Financial Center. But what I have felt with some of our clients is that for more and more fintech programs, they have somehow come and base themselves in Dubai more and mostly with the IFC and now with the Central Bank of UAE. And a lot of health tech and innovative companies or in the blockchain in the crypto space have gone to Abu Dhabi, which again is now changing in the last 1 year with Dubai taking the lead in that as well. So there is not as such a difference. Like we are an ADGM licensed law firm, but we work across UAE. We don't have any. So to clarify, there is no restriction that if you're an Abu Dhabi based company, you cannot do this in the rest of the Emirate. So it's like one license and you could operate anywhere in the country.
Just my two thoughts on that same question. That the businesses have settled the way you have, it has to do with the maturity of those particular segments. So the FinTech is sector within Dubai, I think, and again, goes back to having the relationships and stakeholders and building the right connectivity in the broader ecosystem. You'll get more of those players here in Dubai versus blockchain, crypto. Those are definitely new industries that are coming up. And so, that's a sector that Abu Dhabi has been wanting to develop. So depending on which space you are, you may want to think about how the broader ecosystem has developed within Dubai or within Abu Dhabi, and that may help inform your decision on where you want to base yourself. Because as my two colleagues said, in terms of incentives, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the ability to work across both cities, you will not find very much difference. So it's really depending on what is your business in and what kind of broader stakeholder support will you get for that business.
Great to know. Thank you so much to apologies for that. And John, I'll hand over to you just to wrap up the session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Stuart. Much appreciated. So thank you very much for those that attended from Australia. I hope you found this useful. If you did and you want to learn more, please contact Stuart Keane in the first instance. We'd love to talk to you about more about opportunities in the region. And of course, I'd really like to say thank you to our panelists today. Thank you for your time, for your insights. It's deeply appreciated. You can see the Australian connection with all of you, and it's wonderful that you've given up your time. I appreciate it. So thanks for joining us today from the Dubai Cyber Innovation Park. This lovely facility has been able to do the Zoom calls with you all. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks very much. Bye.